Oh,
Okay,
so
okay,
yes.
yeah. Just starting the webinar. Hey everyone.
Hi everyone. Can I see everyone?
No, so because we've got it set up as a webinar, we can see who is around.
Oh, okay.
But they can't. They can see us, but we can't see them. It's the way that should work.
Oh, okay.
Hey Oliver. Trying to think if I do admin at this stage. I'm not actually sure if I've got any admin to cover today because I think we did it all yesterday. Let me know if you've got any questions about anything that hasn't been discussed or if you weren't on the session yesterday. I think one main thing is please be reminded that the session tomorrow and on Friday unfortunately have had to be rearranged. We're trying to figure out when we can rearrange those two, and we'll let you know, we'll update you as soon as we do. So apologies for that, last minute changes to month of September, the way it happens. And yeah, I think that's about it. So next session is going to be next week rather than tomorrow evening. Another thing is, as usual, all recordings will be made available later on. And this is a Q&A session, so I'll cover this again in the introduction bit. But please do ask questions. I've got a few starter questions for Isabel, who I know also has a very tight ending, so we're going to get started very quickly, but please do put your questions in and upvote any other questions that you see that you think are kind of particularly relevant. As usual, your questions are always much better than mine. And if they've been upvoted, they're more likely to be seen. But having said that, like I said, I know Isabel does have a pretty tight cutoff. So we're just going to get started and let people kind of join in the next few minutes. Welcome to everyone. Today we're going to be learning about raising a little bit more about the founder experience from raising investment. And we're here to hear from Isabel, who I think is going to have some particular insights due to her own career path up till now. But Isabel, I'll let you introduce yourself and explain kind of what exactly I mean by that.
Thanks so much, Julia. And hi, everyone. I hear you guys are joining from everywhere on the globe. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so Julia asked me to start with a bit of background on myself. So my background is both in operations and VC. I started off my career joining BlaBlaCar, a French tech company, back in 2013 as an early employee. And then I spent 5 years building out BlaBlaCar's international expansion and then becoming their head of strategy. And I don't, for those who don't know, so BlaBlaCar is a French tech company doing long distance ride sharing. So if I was to drive to Manchester tomorrow from London, I would share my ride on BlaBlaCar. And then if Julia needed to go to Manchester that same day, she could join me in my car and she would pay for her seat, and that would offset our fuel costs. So I led international expansion at BlaBlaCar, so took the French model and replicated it across Europe and then across the rest of the world. And then once we'd done that, I became head of strategy for BlaBlaCar, so helping with fundraisings, but also running our internal strategy. And so I spent 5 years at BlaBlaCar, and that time BlaBlaCar became a unicorn. So it was really sort of the whole growth journey from like tiny startup to like billion-dollar company and 500, 600 employees. And that was a really thrilling and exciting time. And then I decided I wanted to learn more about the financing side of things. So I joined Boulderton Capital in London. And some of you will have met Saranga, I think, who's quite involved as well with Future VC. So worked with Saranga at Boulderton for a couple of years. And for those who don't know, so Boulderton is a Series A investor, quite prolific. They invest all across Europe, on average about 10 to $15 million per company. So I spent 2 years being an investor, and then at the start of last year, I finally caved and decided to start my own company. I'd really enjoyed being an investor, and it was a really like a great learning journey, but I always wanted to be on the other side of the table, and so decided that it was time for me to become an entrepreneur. And I was really lucky because Boulderton, they introduced me to my now co-founder, actually. So we got started building Riff in February of last year, and Riff is a virtual office for high velocity teams. So in essence, it's a desktop app that allows you to speak and to your team as if you were all sat in the same room, even though you're remote. And we do that by placing you in an audio space with your team, and then you can just speak to whoever you need to speak to in one click, and others can overhear the conversation. And so we got started just at the start of COVID, not really realizing that COVID would change our lives forever. And so we've been going on this journey for about a year and a half. We raised some money last summer, and that has allowed us to build a team of now 8 people, including my co-founder and myself. We are still in private beta, but hopefully launching out of private beta soon.
Still on mute. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Isabel. So everyone, I hope you can see kind of really that's the potential to answer a lot of questions you might have about whether being an entrepreneur, being an investor, any side of the table. So before I go on any further, I've got a note from Diana who can't hear anything. Diana, just checking, can you hear? Is that me you can't hear, or Isabel? Or okay, you can hear now. Good. Can everyone else? Everyone else can hear as well. Okay. Let me know if there's any other tech issues, and we'll see what we can do to resolve them. But thanks so much, Isabel. And kind of bringing back to the point about the bit of the funding that you raised last summer. So I know that was actually a seed round, so you haven't yet raised your Series A, but this session is a bit more focused around going towards Series A. What considerations are you kind of taking into account when you're planning for I know you plan to raise again. What considerations are you taking account when planning for this? And do you think that these considerations are any different, having spent your time, given your kind of career to date, to what you might have thought you needed to take into account otherwise?
Yeah, that's a great question. And obviously I'm speaking from as someone who hasn't raised Series A yet. So I'm sure that if you ask me this question after my Series A, I'll answer it very differently to what I'm going to say. But fundamentally, I think one of the best pieces of advice I got for our seed round was actually from one of our angel investors, who said, you know what, your seed round is the only time in your career you can raise just based on your name. Because we raised and we've been going for 3 months. There was this really, really early version of our product that wasn't even like a proper alpha version. It was just really the bare bony version of our product. So it was the only opportunity we would ever have to raise just based on what we've done so far in our careers, and without having to prove much traction. And so this angel investor, he told me, you know what, just go and raise as much as you can, because the reality is you're going to do many, many, many mistakes in your first 18, 24 months. It's, building a product is not like a linear process. It's not because you do A that it results in B. You actually have to do a lot of experimentation, and the most random thing can get you to product market fit. And so we ended up raising more than we thought we would, and that has allowed us to, even now, a year and a half in, have enough runway. So, some of the, and so we're not really forced to raise Series A yet, and that kind of freedom is just wonderful. Just because we're in a stage now where we have, we're really we're getting great feedback from our users. And we really get time to sort of build out all the features they want before we sort of launch publicly or would need to raise again. So I think the first thing that you should do always when you sort of raise, whether it's seed or Series A, is just plan for everything to take a bit longer than you thought it would, and sort of, you know, raise enough to cover you for sort of all of the duration and some extra. The second thing I'll say is there's this excellent blog post by YC on how to raise your Series A that I think would actually answer this question in a much better way than I ever am going to. But a few of the learnings from that blog post are, you know, VCs will always want to speak to you. And the reality is you should sort of select, as in you should speak to them when you feel really good about your product, because there are lots of up and downs. So make sure you don't like take calls when you're feeling particularly desperate. Instead, like wait for another high and speak to them then. And then in those conversations, sort of, you know, find the ones that are excited about you, and then maintain a relationship with them. But, you know, whenever you speak to them, make sure they are actually like giving you time and helping you answer questions. You know, don't speak to VCs just because you feel obliged to. And then the moment you want to go raise your Series A, you have sort of a number of investors, you know, maybe 5+ that, you know, can or want to invest, and then try and sort of run a really tight process with them. And I think that's great advice, because investors can take a huge amount of your time if you're not careful. You know, every investor will want to have spoken to you just so to make sure that they know you, but that's not always the best use of your time. So that's the second piece of advice that I sort of got that I found really helpful in preparing our Series A. And the third piece of advice is, you know, at times you'll have investors wanting to sort of invest and you feel like you're not quite ready for Series A, and they will want to preempt it, meaning that they will want to sort of maybe invest a bit less than what you thought you would raise, and then that also means that you'll have a lower valuation, etc. And often that's a great vote of confidence towards you and your product if someone wants to sort of preempt your Series A, but it's not always right, you know, and that if you have the money and you have the conviction that you're on the right path, so the best thing you can do is actually run a proper process that you control, and, you know, not one where you're like forced into racing. So those are the things we have in mind. Obviously, we haven't raised our Series A yet, and to be honest, like the most important thing at our stage is just getting the product right. But those are sort of the things that are, I guess, in my mind with regards to our upcoming Series A. Does that make sense?
No, thanks. And really helpful. And there's quite a few things I kind of want to pick up on there, and probably will throughout, especially your point about kind of preempting and lowering evaluation, and how that's actually just quite it's not a very founder friendly way of going about investing, I guess, as an investor, or it depends on how they do it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it can be a great experience from an entrepreneur's point of view as well, because you don't have to really run a process. So you can just like run a really short and quick process, and especially if you know the investor and trust the investor, and you always knew you wanted to raise from them, then it's phenomenal. You know, go for it. I think it's, as I said, it's a massive vote of confidence. And I know quite a few entrepreneurs that are really happy having done preemptive rounds. But in the investment world, if you give up a lot of like information to someone who wants to run a preemptive round with you, and you tell them about your business, and then they end up backing off, you've given away all of this information in return of very little. So if you run the advantage you have in running a proper process is that you control until the very end what information you give away. And once you do start running your process, you only give away the information about your company to the ones you select, and you do it all at the same time. So you make sure that no information about your company sort of floods the market way in advance of you wanting to run a proper process. So it's all, as an entrepreneur, you have to be, I guess, quite thoughtful about sort of how much you give away about your company and when, is how I would put it. Just because investors all know each other and they all talk. And I think as an associate at Bolderton, I loved that. And I thought it was so helpful to get feedback from other investors on markets and and companies, but as an entrepreneur, there's no point really in people talking about you unless they're saying great things. So I would be just quite mindful of what you share. Then,
do you think you're a bit more kind of cautious? Probably isn't the word, but do you think you're a bit more aware of what you share, having gone through the experience of working at a fund, than you might have been otherwise?
Yeah, that's a great question. I definitely think so. Yeah, not because I distrust on investors, right? It's not a matter of like realizing, ooh, there's this like club of people that share information within them, but it's more a matter of I did not realize just how powerful it is when an entrepreneur comes to you and they sort of share information with you for the very first time, and you're exposed to this world, and suddenly it feels like this entrepreneur has done a whole bunch of stuff in their lives, as compared to like meeting them and then meeting them again and again and again and again, and then in those intervals it feels like they've done things, but that sort of wow effect from meeting someone only a few times, it slowly gets lost over time, I think. And it's I don't know if this is true for all investors, but there definitely is something about like, as an entrepreneur, I guess you want to make yourself feel maybe a bit like there's a scarcity around you, like you're not like not everyone can sort of have access to all of your information or the company at once. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. And I think it is such a good point to kind of take into account that it's so helpful from the investor's point of view that you have this whole network. And I mean, I think everyone in London kind of, it's less than 1 degree of separation almost to anyone else working in the VC industry, which is amazing.
Yeah,
but it's a really good point for kind of our future VCs to be aware of when they're investing and they're talking to their own entrepreneurs about things that what it's like from the founder's perspective and what you may or may not want to be kind of putting out there. I also want to pick up on your point about kind of VCs who you particularly wanted to work with, or VCs who really added value and can help you when you're having conversations right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a really interesting point of like, what are you actually looking for from those VCs? What's the kind of extra value add that you think investors can really offer to you right now? And also, like, how do you actually identify those particular? Is it a fund in particular that you're looking for? Or is it an individual? Is it a mix of both? Like, how do you go about
it? Yeah. So is the question, what can investors offer me now if they haven't invested yet? In order to sort of build that relationship between us and show that, they could be really helpful in future. That is a great question. I think, investors have one big advantage over entrepreneurs, which is that they have, they see a lot of companies, so they can build pattern recognition, right? So they can sort of identify trends or strategies that sort of seem to work across similar companies. And I think when we speak to investors, one of the things we like to do is just ask them questions as to what they think works and what they've seen other companies doing successfully and whether they know X, Y, Z. So I think as an investor, if you can offer really genuine advice or actually do some legwork to talk to a few entrepreneurs to pass on what they've learned to us, that is obviously massively helpful. But also if you have a great network and can offer introductions to people that we might want to talk to, that's really, really helpful. And that's sort of how we think about investors right now, since we're not raising. It might be a bit different once we do start raising, in that, I think when you raise, you want to decide on the right investor by looking at probably 3 things, like the level of trust you have with them. So obviously, if you've known them before, and that's great. You want to look at just, I guess, what kind of deal they're offering you, right? And then lastly, if they're a great brand, that's obviously a plus. And so that's sort of the equation you draw in your mind, right? Like, how well do I know them? How much do I trust them? Is the deal fair? And do I like to be associated with the name of this VC? And so, those three elements would have to be right for us to then go and raise from someone. But obviously they can be helpful in the meantime by, giving us introductions and helping us figure out some of the sort of trickier bits of our business.
I think introductions also always comes back to introductions and networks, and what can you as a fund and you as an individual kind of offer.
Yeah,
offer to your
massively
entrepreneurs.
so, I find. Yeah, a VC is really a like networking game. Yeah, and you build that over time, right? It doesn't mean that you become a VC tomorrow and then try and network with all the VCs out there. It's a matter of like just building really genuine relationships with other VCs, just meeting over coffee, having chats, sharing information, etc. Yeah, insights. Yeah.
Please, everyone, do kind of put questions in, because I'm going to be on. I'll just ask questions as we go along if they pop up. So I've got a few more here as well. I kind of wanted to go back to your point as well about valuations and kind of lower your valuation, get a good valuation, and how you kind of go about that, because we have talked a bit about financials and valuations, and I think it's always something to kind of be conscious of as a investor, that for some founders this is more important than for others. Without sharing your valuation, how do you kind of approach thinking of how much you raise and what that impacts? Because also you did raise more than initially planned, which would have obviously impacted how much you valued your company at. How did you approach this? And do you think that you kind of, okay, I'm trying to avoid asking exactly the same question every time, but I think it is always going to come back at, do you think kind of previous experience and previous understanding impacted this approach? Or do you think you would have just kind of gone along with it and gone along with the advice of your angel investor regardless?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as you say, like the quantum you're trying to raise will impact your valuation. And so it's always a matter of like, okay, how much do I actually need to raise? How much do I want to raise? And do I think the valuation is comparatively fair as compared to other companies that are out there? And the truth is, you have to go through this process. So first you ask yourself, how much do I need to raise? Then you're like, okay, how much would be the ideal amount I want to raise? What kind of valuation does that leave me with? Okay, do I think that's fair? And then you look at, okay, who is trying to invest, and do I believe in that investor? Do I like their brand? And then if all of those things work, that's how you sort of decide on your valuation. There are ways in which you can like obviously increase your valuation further. So the first one is competition. If you have many investors sort of trying to invest, that will usually lead to a much higher valuation. And especially in the current market, I don't know if you guys covered this with other investors, but with American VCs having come to Europe and lots of new money coming into Europe, so new funds setting up shop in Europe, and sort of successful entrepreneurs setting up their own funds, you actually now are in an environment as an entrepreneur, where you usually, you get lots of interest from VCs. Doesn't mean they all want to invest at all, but if you did want to sort of structure a proper round where you give multiple VCs a chance to invest, that might mean that then as a result of the competition between those VCs, you end up with a higher valuation. Does that impact how we currently think about our Series A? I think actually I don't think one needs to worry about their valuation too much unless they're raising. So it's not something that keeps me up at night. What really keeps me up at night is like our users, do they love our product? Are we like, building it fast enough? And then I think if you do those things well, eventually, you'll have VCs wanting to invest, and then that will decide on your valuation. Yeah.
Okay. Just gotta get the product out there first, and then the details later.
Yeah, that's really what matters most right now.
Okay. Oliver is asking a little bit more about kind of timing and when you would say is actually a good time to raise Series A. So
I mean, that's like the holy grail, isn't that, of all the questions. Historically, I was a VC up until the start of 2020. And whilst I was obviously, you usually sort of, especially for B2B SaaS businesses like ours, you would have considered like the $1 million ARR mark as the right mark to go and raise. So that's $1 million ARR means you generate roughly $1 million in annual revenue, or you're sort of on your way there. So you start raising once you're at like 80, 100K monthly revenue. And that was sort of historically how you would have thought of Series A. And then even when I was a VC, given that we had more VCs coming to Europe and investing in Europe, we saw that mark going down because VCs tried to invest earlier and earlier. Nowadays, there really is like no right answer as to when you want to go raise a Series A, which is where it's really, really useful to like speak to a few VCs between your seed and your Series A, and you try and get a sense from them as to what other Series A they're currently doing and where those companies are at, etc. Fundamentally, I think you want to go raise a Series A when you think you've sort of established a version of your product that users really love, and you can, by sort of investing more money in marketing, you'll get more growth and your product is sort of ready to really scale. That's, I think, conceptually how I think of Series A, but there's no real like revenue mark anymore that I would follow. I hope that answered your question, Oliver.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has become such a kind of arbitrary term.
Yeah.
In recent years, I remember when I started working in this place about 5 years ago, it was like, it wasn't even ARR, it was just how much are you raising? This ticket size belongs to this kind of stage of investment. And
to nowadays, like, I think you get like,
what does that mean?
Yeah, you get Series A valuations of like 100 million, 200 million. Like it's sort of lost its definition in that sense.
It varies so much by sector and just what you're doing. So, and this will also kind of probably impact you guys when you're going into funds about like kind of what stage you will think you're investing at versus what stage other investors might say that you're investing at, and they'll be entirely based on kind of who they're working with and what they're doing, what's achievable at different stages for different amounts of money, which is always something to kind of consider. So I kind of want to talk a bit about, we have discussed this a little bit with Rachel from Afrocentrics as well. When you raise, it's slightly different, I guess, because you came in with a network already of investors, but everyone here is going to be moving into probably a more junior role within a firm, who, as we know, are usually not the final decision makers, but they're the ones who really have to kind of hustle to get businesses they like through, which I know you will have experienced already. When you were raising, did you kind of generally interact with the more senior or the junior members of the investment team? And do you have any real tips for our participants who are watching on how to really make themselves attractive to founders, and B, kind of really just push their kind of the founders they really believe in through to the IC, and to kind of get that decision, find that investment made?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question. So usually seed stage funds or seed funds have fewer juniors, I think, than like Series A and more established funds. So at seed, you sort of tend to interact with mainly partners. And as an entrepreneur, there's always a certain advantage to being directly in contact with the partner, which is so unfair when you're a junior. I was an associate at Bulletin, and often it used to like piss me off when when entrepreneurs were looking to sort of connect with a partner. But it's just the nature of the game. So ways in which you can add value is you can just being friendly and empathetic to like their situation, and wanting to really support entrepreneurs by providing them with information, and even like offering to help them. So for instance, one of our companies was looking to invest, so one of the companies that we ended up investing in, which was a B2B company, and I worked on that investment, they were looking to expand into Europe, and they wanted help with that. So, one of the ways in which we build our relationship was by saying that I could help them, that I've done it for BlaBlaCar. I sort of was really comfortable setting up or helping them figure out how they wanted to do it. And so, by being genuinely helpful and sort of spending time on their problem, et cetera, that's obviously something that entrepreneurs really appreciate. So I would always try and build that really genuine relationship where you just worry about the same things that they worry about. And then the other way in which, and entrepreneurs can always tell if that's the case, but the other way in which you can build like a really strong relationship and make yourself really useful to them is by genuinely sort of defending their case internally. So yes, you will, as a junior, you will spend a huge amount of time just having to sort of evangelize, your companies with the investment team. So typically, like if you're really excited about something, it might be that some of the sort of other investment team members, they don't get it because they have had a different experience in life. They might be in a different age category to yours. They might be of a different gender. And so if you sort of spend time with the entrepreneur learning, just figuring out how the entrepreneur sells their own case and then taking that back to the investment team, usually you will have a much better chance of convincing the investment team by sort of taking the arguments that the entrepreneur has spent years, right, looking into. So I think getting that sort of bridge between the entrepreneur and the team right can be really helpful, and the entrepreneur will always be so grateful if you sort of defend their case. So yeah, I think those are the two ways you can really help add value.
I love that, and I love that kind of point about adding your own perspective and kind of seeing like a different understanding of the product and how it can really make a difference. Because it will.
Yeah.
Chances are that you will probably want to be one of the younger people on the team if you're joining, or
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And yeah, so really like trust your gut. If you see value in something and you're a really convinced user, that speaks, that is a really powerful thing.
Yeah. I remember I once just sent a product to my then 16-year-old sister who was very much in the target market and was just like, they get it. Can we move this forward and go through? I know that you don't understand it, but let's really fight the ground. But I think they're really, really helpful. We've got a couple more questions. One from Bola again about kind of Series A and raising. So from a team perspective, what is the actual expectation of team maturity for Series A? I guess, is that in terms of how many people would you expect to have on the team before raising, or how many people you want to build up? Bola, put in the chat to kind of clarify that.
I mean, we can answer both. Yeah, I think there's absolutely no rules, is the truth, right? You have like 20-year-olds raising Series A with maybe 5 people on their team, the same way you have like 45-year-olds, with a team of like 50 raising Series A. So I think there's really no rules to that. You just want to believe that the entrepreneur has an edge in how they think about something. So you want to be able to sort of, I guess as an investor, you want to feel that you can back their vision. You want to be impressed with the caliber of people they've hired, right? So especially at Series A, you want to sort of get a sense that the entrepreneur can build a really powerful team. And then it doesn't really matter. Obviously, if there are only 5 people at Series A, that is a really small size. Like typically Series A, you'd expect to see like maybe like 15, 20 people plus. But equally, there have been plenty of Series A where it was a really small team, or plenty of Series A where some of the sort of more senior members of the team still needed to be recruited. So if you have if you have impressive growth, a lot of the other stuff will become secondary.
I hope that answered the question. In terms of like maturity as like a VP of sales, I guess the answer is always there's no rules.
Yeah.
Okay, anonymous question. If a senior partner declines a deal as a junior associate, are you allowed to angel invest in the company directly? I guess that would depend on the funds you have available.
Yeah, that's a great question. So usually that's depends on the fund as well. As in, I'm sure most funds would be happy for you to angel invest, especially if it's your own money. There might be funds where that's not allowed, but you know, I don't see why they would prevent you from investing, especially if it's your own money and you've built conviction on the, you know, on the deal. So yeah, my answer would be most likely yes, but TBD who you're working with.
I think the big thing also is that sometimes founders will have kind of a minimum ticket size that you need to kind of consider. So it's all going to depend.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I think, you know, if you are an investor and you have some money to invest, you know, that, I mean, I would definitely encourage people to like do some angel investments, because nothing, I guess, speaks of conviction like your own money. If you're willing to put your own money to something, it means that you really must believe in it. So, and I think it's a great way of learning how to become a really good investor. Also, because you know, it takes years to figure out whether you're any good as an investor, right? Purely from a sort of returns perspective. So, the earlier you start, the earlier you'll know, the sooner you'll know. Yeah.
But would you say the same for like crowdfunding, or would you specifically say kind of what level of investment do you think would be very helpful for the people here?
Sorry, what's the question?
Would you say like the same thing in terms of like, don't angel invest go through a crowdfunding platform, or that's a slightly different setup? But
yeah, no, I think that's also applicable to crowdfunding. Definitely, yeah. I mean, I think if you'd invested in the like 2017 round in Revolut, you'd be a really thrilled investor right now, right? And it's just unrealistic for most people to be an angel investor in Revolut in the very first round. So I would just get the earliest, and I can.
There you go, a bit of investing practice on the side. So I know we've got to kind of wrap up quite soon because we've got to kind of run to the next meeting.
But sorry.
It's the world, going back to the world of in-person meetings and planning our timetable around that. We kind of covered a bit of this already, but basically we have here this cohort of hopeful VC analysts, and you've already talked a little bit about kind of what makes them and their funds attractive to entrepreneurs. But is there, I guess another way of saying that is, if there was one thing that you would take away going into a fund now rather than going the other way around, what do you think that would be? Like that one piece of advice that you wish you'd had, or that you wish you'd been aware of when you were starting out as an analyst? It'll have to be two or three if one is hard to narrow down to.
I mean, I never was an analyst, so I struggled to answer in that sense, but having gone in as an associate, I would probably, one of the things I wish I had done more is just, I try to look at companies from all sectors, because I really wanted to sort of learn about all kinds of different sectors. And that was, for me personally, that was exactly what I wanted. And I ended up spending 2 years in VC, so it was a great, I sort of had many learnings looking into all kinds of sectors. But actually, if you want to build like a long-term career in VC, one of the best things you can do is just really focus on the sectors you actually love and spend time on learning about them and going a bit deeper into them, so you can speak with some authority when you find great companies in the sectors you love. So that's probably one of the things I would tell myself if I was to do it again. I really want to spend a lot of time in VC. And then is there anything else I would advise myself to do? I would just genuinely, like, if you believe in a company, just don't give up. Like, really fight until you've convinced everyone on your team that it's worth investing. I think as a junior, it depends on how much professional experience you have, but obviously, like, in most jobs, if you're told no by a superior, you would just back off, right? But actually, as an investor, that's not at all the case. Like, if you have built conviction on someone, I'm sure there's many things that of them that other people just don't know. So make sure everyone on your investment team knows about those things so they can reach the same level of conviction on a company or on a founder. Yeah.
So like people hire new team members so they have someone to argue with and argue back with.
100%.
No one likes arguing more than a VC.
Oh my God. Yeah. And the funny thing is, like, partners get told no by other partners and then have to go on this 1 week crusade to convince everyone else that the deal is worth it. So it doesn't only apply to juniors. Yeah.
I guess another thing is, equally, we've got a few people here who are currently founders or working on a startup in some other capacity before maybe going into VC. Any kind of final words of wisdom for them, especially having sat on both sides of the table, and tips for doing, I guess, the reverse of what you've done?
Yeah. I mean, that's like the ultimate superpower. I think if you've been a founder and you know what it's like and you know what the hardship of it all, and you can speak with like a level of empathy that like some other VCs just won't ever have, like, nourish that. And I think like be just honest about your founder experience, because founders will really appreciate that. Most of the time, like if I think of my day to day as a founder is really not glamorous, right? I mostly go from like problem to problem to problem, and having a VC in front of me that understands that and is happy to talk about that and doesn't need to just see the like fully curated pitch, that is usually a VC I'll like to spend time with. So if you've been a founder, like I think that actually gives you a great edge as a VC. Yeah.
Thank you. And also we need more of them in the European ecosystem in general.
Yeah. But I think actually equally, if you at some point are toying with the idea of becoming a founder, doing a couple of years in VC first is also a great idea. Like many great founders have been VCs first, because you learn how to fundraise and you build a network and etc. So both ways, they're like highly compatible, both sides. So which is why people tend to switch from one to the other.
Great. Well, thank you so much. If anyone has any kind of niggling questions that I haven't figured out how to phrase or kind of left over from the end of this session, is there a good way for them to get hold of you afterwards? Any questions they didn't want to share with the group either?
Why don't they just send those to you and you can send them to me and I'll answer.
Perfect.
Cool. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much as well, and thank you everyone for joining. And we're going to give you kind of 15 minutes back to go and have your lunch and have a nap.
Thanks so much. Have a lovely day.
Bye.
Bye.